to now introduce our next presenters, Jennifer West and Rebecca Matteson, who are from UTS Insearch. And they're actually looking at teachers' attitudes to moving online quickly. Welcome, Jennifer and Rebecca.
Hi, thanks, Sophie. And thanks, Enrica. That was really great. So welcome, everyone, to our presentation. Like Sophie said, I'm Rebecca Matteson.
And I'm Jennifer West, and we work at UTS Insearch in Sydney. So thanks for joining us today to hear about our action research project, which looked at teachers' attitudes to moving online. First of all, we've got a question for you, actually, a little bit of work to do. We'd like you to cast your minds back to March this year. And how did you feel when your organization moved to teaching online? Could you type one word in the chat, if possible, for us? Frustrated, thrilled, relieved, excited, panic, challenged, anxious, tired, the middle photo, free, uncertain. Great answers. Thank you very much. When we asked our teachers the same question, these are some of the responses that we got. And I'm sure they resonate with you. So today I'm going to outline our presentation. First, we'll describe our context and our participants, and then this led us to formulating our research questions. Then we'll discuss how we collected our data, and we'll summarize our findings, and then discuss our conclusions and reflections with you.
Okay, so first, a bit about our context and participants. So at UTS Insearch, we are a pathway to UTS, and we have 3 different programs. We have academic English, foundation, and diploma programs. And in our research, our participants were our teachers. So the ELICOS teachers that teach in all 3 of those programs. At the beginning of 2020, we had over 100 ELICOS teachers at UTS Insearch with many different types of experience. So from 5 years, 10, 15, 20 plus years teaching experience, some of them. And our initial focus, originally when we applied to do action research, the theme for 2020 was blended learning. And so we wanted to focus on the plan for UTS Insearch was to move to a new curriculum over the course of 2020, a new curriculum which was a bit more blended than our traditional face-to-face classes, and using a new learning management system, or LMS, called Canvas. But as you know, everything changed. For us, the date was the 23rd of March. That's when we began teaching entirely online. At UTS Insearch, we had 2 days notice. So all of our teachers had 2 days notice to learn that they had to start teaching online. And so we changed our focus of our research from blended learning to exclusively online, and more of a focus on the challenges that came up. So we still had the transition to the new curriculum and the new LMS, but our focus changed a bit more to the challenges that arose based on all the changes that were happening. So we were focusing on how teachers managed their emotional response to these changes, what teachers had to do to adapt their lessons. So we had our traditional curriculum was meant for face-to-face delivery, and now they were delivering online. And all of the other changes and challenges that came with the new experience of remote teaching. Here's a screenshot of an example of some of the training that we did. So Jennifer and I and some of our UTS Insearch colleagues, we provided different types of training during this time. And here's a screenshot of one of the training I delivered over Zoom. Here I was talking about the annotate function of Zoom. We recorded these videos and we made these videos available to teachers. They could watch them at any time afterwards.
So this led us to formulate our research questions, which we had two. The first question was, what are teachers' attitudes towards online teaching and learning? And the second question is, how can we adequately prepare teachers for the changes they're experiencing, both with the initial emergency online teaching and the subsequent delivery of our courses? So how did we collect our data? We had two cycles. Cycle one was after 6 weeks of online teaching. Rebecca and I formulated a questionnaire. The questionnaire had open-ended, closed-ended questions, and there were 17 questions. We sent that out, we emailed it, and we got 22 respondents. We got 22 responses, so that was really terrific. Then after 9 weeks of online teaching, we had two focus groups actually. Each focus group was 40 minutes long, and there were 4 participants in each of those groups. So that meant there were 8 participants. In that focus group, we wanted to focus on one question only, and the question was, you've survived 9 weeks. What did you learn, and what can you use for going forward? Reflecting on what you've learned and going forward with that. So we got really rich data, rich qualitative data from that. And then we used the data from both the questionnaire and from the focus group. Sorry, I forgot to say, we audio recorded the focus group responses and we transcribed them. But we took the data from the research, from the questionnaire and from the focus groups, and we used thematic analysis of the qualitative data and categorize them into categories. Rebecca will speak to some of the interesting findings that we found from that later on in this. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, so first we'll talk about our findings in terms of our research questions. So first, our first research question was about teachers' attitudes. This question comes from the initial questionnaire. We asked teachers if they felt that online teaching was as effective as face-to-face. And you can see there that the yellow and the green are disagree. So that was about 64% of our respondents disagreed and said, no, it's not as effective. Of course, they were talking about the online teaching, which was emergency remote delivery. So we can see that they didn't think it was as effective, and probably they were well outside of their comfort zone while they were doing this. This answer is not unexpected, because we also found that only 1 out of our 22 respondents had ever used the technology we were asking them to use to deliver classes. And only 5 had ever used any video technology to deliver online classes.
So in that same questionnaire, we asked another question, which did give us some surprising results. The question we asked was, has your attitude changed to teaching after this period of time? And 18 out of the 22 respondents said yes. And it was an open-ended question, so we got more details from them. And so how had the attitude changed after 6 weeks? So we got some very interesting responses here. One of them was, one teacher responded by saying that it has opened up a whole new way of teaching, plus I've learned so much. Another response was that remote teaching creates many opportunities to leverage new skills and refocus the way we teach. And this response was telling too. We were able to continue our teaching despite many other organizations closing down. And yeah, it was telling. At UTS Insearch, we were able to very quickly, with the help of the IT department, get a computer for every teacher. So within those first 2 days, every teacher was given a computer, and the materials that we were using was on that computer. So our material had already been digitalized, and we were able to use either Blackboard or UTS Online. So that enabled us to continue teaching, and that was great for the students as well.
I'll give you here a quote from one of our focus groups. So one teacher said, "I always have viewed teaching as those plate spinners. You have to run around and keep this plate spinning. And if you see one wobbling, you have to go over. In the classroom, if you see you're losing someone, it's kind of easy to just go, 'Hey, what are you doing?' Or 'What's wrong?' It's so hard online." So we got this from a few teachers talking about how one of the challenges about teaching online was it was harder to monitor students. It was harder to see if students stopped paying attention. It was harder to see if students were understanding or coping with the material. In fact, a couple teachers said that they didn't realize their students weren't understanding until they received the assignments and the students had done something in the assignment that was completely unexpected. So it was a lot harder to kind of monitor that as they went along. We also had some similar responses in our questionnaire about how difficult the classroom dynamics were online. Some teachers talked about how in the physical classroom, they would do some activities such as backs to the board or running dictation, and they were struggling to find a way to do an activity that achieved similar aims, but online. And many teachers talked about their struggle with creating a rapport with their students online. They felt that that was much harder to achieve than it was in the physical classroom.
So summarizing our findings in relation to teachers' attitudes then, we saw that teachers were willing to adapt quickly, and that teachers' attitudes were positive after 6 weeks. And this was due to the development of new skills. Also that the school remained open, so there was some job security there. The biggest challenge, as Rebecca's mentioned there, was the classroom dynamics, building rapport, monitoring students, keeping the plate spinning, as that last quote said. So this we found was the biggest challenge for teachers with regards to their attitude.
So our second research question was about adequately preparing teachers. Here's some of what we found. This again comes from our initial questionnaire. We asked if teachers felt they were receiving the support that they needed. You'll see the red and the blue are agree. So about 60% of our respondents said yes, they were receiving the support they needed, which was great at the time. It was nice hearing that. And then the 40% we were wondering, well, perhaps one person in our focus group said, well, perhaps the 40% that said no, maybe they felt that they actually didn't need much support. Or it's also possible that we weren't providing the kind of support that they really needed.
So one response from the focus group really exemplifies this. And this teacher said, I don't normally use a lot of PowerPoints, but now we're trying to use all of this other sorts of technology, which given enough time, I can sit down and work it out. I'm relatively tech savvy. However, I've lost so much time in my day while my kids are at home while I'm trying to work. I'm just so stretched. So although we have all these trainings available to us, I don't actually have time to do them. So this response, just really shows us a lot, because we can see here that the training may have been adequate, but teachers were now more time poor because of their other responsibilities they had at home, but also the preparation was taking longer because the materials that they were using were produced for face-to-face or bricks and mortar school, and now they had to be adapted to the online teaching forum and online delivery.
I'll talk a bit now about all of our qualitative data. So we got information from the open-ended questions in the questionnaire and the focus group transcripts. As Jennifer said, we used a thematic analysis and found some categories. We found 5 different categories that came out of our data. On the left, you'll see the categories we found. We found categories of teaching and learning, emotion, technology, physical, and development. In the middle there, you'll see some examples of the keywords that we found in our data. And on the right, there's the frequency that those themes came out in the data. And that we have 2 numbers in red because we found this kind of interesting. So the initial questionnaire, we had a variety of questions. We had a balance of different types of questions that were asking about teaching and learning, emotion, and technology. But the focus in the initial questionnaire, the most frequent theme that came out of that was emotion. So teachers were reflecting on the move to online teaching and how the first 6 weeks had gone, and there was a lot of emotional response there. And then 3 weeks after that, in the focus groups, you can see that the most frequent theme was teaching and learning. So perhaps this means that, by the time teachers had done 9 weeks teaching online, maybe they were a bit more settled and were really focused on that teaching and learning. So to summarize our findings for our second research question, which was about preparation, it's really, really reassuring to see that we really saw that teachers remained committed to pedagogy. The training that Jennifer and I and our other UTS Insearch colleagues provided was mainly focused on the new technology that teachers would need to use. However, our teachers showed us that they maintained a focus on teaching methodology, student engagement. So I think this was a really reassuring finding.
So in conclusion, and the reflections that we found from this, we found that teachers at UTS Insearch, the challenge of moving online has become an opportunity to develop new skills. That the ongoing remote teaching materials will require curriculum and material development. The materials will have to be, will continue to have to be worked on and made for online delivery at an institutional level. So continuing to develop the materials for online delivery is really, really, really important. And this is a continuing commitment for us. That the technology is simply a delivery tool, and probably, simply a delivery tool. For our organization, we feel that success will depend on creating new online materials and continuing professional development. And already this has fed back into our UTS professional development. For example, in our next PD day, our PD will focus on teacher development rather than on technology. So we're feeding this back in to our professional development cycle. These are our references. And have you got any questions in that chat box? How do we?
In the Q&A, I believe.
Q&A too.
Thanks, Rebecca and Jennifer.
So
I'll read the questions out to you if you like.
Sorry.
Yeah. All right. So Phil's asked, did you ask the teachers what their attitudes towards online teaching were before March 23? Maybe this came up in the focus groups.
No, we didn't ask that question, did we, Rebecca?
Well, what I can say is we asked retrospectively. So obviously we didn't know that we were moving to teaching online until it happened. But in that initial questionnaire, after 6 weeks of online teaching, we asked teachers to think back to before. And that was, we did ask them kind of what was their thought before they actually did it. But that was just retrospective.
Okay. Paul has another question. Do you think a return to campus will impact on staff either emotionally or in terms of their PD? It's a great question, Paul. It's come up a lot lately.
Yeah, I think It's likely that we're going to be doing at least some online teaching for a very long time. So I think even if we do go back to the physical classroom, probably we'll have some hybrid situation for at least a while. Yeah, I think that would definitely impact on teachers' emotions. In some ways, I think a lot of teachers would be happy to go back because, you know, the thing that's missing now is kind of that camaraderie that you'd have in the staff room. So I could imagine that being a good thing. But yeah.
In terms of PD, I guess what has happened with everything, all the training sessions we've done, they have been, I suppose, curated, and they're there on our learning management system that people can go back and watch and see all the different things that we did over the, I suppose, the past 3 semesters since March. So, you know, that's there for longevity. It's not just something that has happened once. Everything's been recorded. There's videos, there's slides, so that can help a lot with PD.
Yeah, I do think, you know, it's sort of almost that reverse culture shock as well, isn't it? So we've all now finally got our heads around this new normal, and then coming back to normal will again have its challenges. And I think there's a great opportunity for professional development and also just discussion with staff when that process starts to happen.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, there's one more question. Someone is asking about the phrase you've used, technology is simply a delivery tool. They're not sure what that means. Could you explain it?
Well, I think I suppose some teachers are a little bit afraid of technology, and maybe even in terms of using an LMS, in terms of using Zoom. So people were very apprehensive, and I think some people, you know, were very overwhelmed when asked to go onto the platform, when asked to use Zoom, you know, or Ring Central, but also just in terms of they also were learning a new learning management system. So there was lots of new things there. And as Rebecca said, they were afraid that, that this would take over, you know, so yeah, I think that was probably why we've said that it's simply a delivery tool. It complements what you do. It's not the main focus of what you're doing. It's still those things of building rapport, of having a connection with students, of engaging students, of knowing the students, knowing a little bit about them. They're still incredibly important, and probably more important in the delivery.
Yeah, I think I've heard some people say, you know, good teaching is still good teaching. So those fundamentals are still really important. And another theme that's come out across different centres around PD at this time, and that's come up in your research too, is that teachers still want professional development focus on the fundamentals of teaching. You know, there's been so much focus on teaching with technology or online delivery, but at the end of the day, you know, teaching is still teaching, and we need to focus on that too.
Any
Okay.
other questions?
All right, that's it for questions. So thanks again, Rebecca and Jennifer. That was a really engaging presentation of your research findings. And thank you everyone for coming to our Action Research in ELICOS Colloquium. It's been a real pleasure for me, and I know for Professor Anne Burns and for Marcus from Cambridge Assessment English, to hear all of your project presentations after working with you throughout this year. And you know, for us, it's always just such a delight to see everything come together and presented in such a polished way. So congratulations again to all of the participants in our program this year for your great presentations during this event. For the attendees of the colloquium, we'll send you an email hopefully tomorrow, maybe on Monday, with information about how you can access your statements of attendance for this event and also your CPD points that you've gained for attending. Finally, I guess I'd just like to thank everyone for coming and also remind you that expressions of interest for the Action Research in ELICOS program for next year will be opening in mid-November. So if you head back to our website on the Action Research section around mid-November, you can find out about how you can submit an expression of interest if you're keen to join the program. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us once again, and goodbye.